Hello there, Brick Fanatics. 1, 2, 3, 4, everybody do the dinosaur, because we have a bunch of new LEGO Jurassic World Rebirth sets to show off today. These sets are intended to tie in with the upcoming Jurassic World Rebirth film, which will hit cinemas in July of 2025. It is directed by Gareth Edwards, the guy who did the first of the modern Western Godzilla films, and it is intended as something of a back to basics, back to formula film, where instead of all of these weird mutant dinosaurs that are roaming across all of the Earth, we have a bunch of scientists going to one specific island in order to see some actual real dinosaurs that once upon a time existed. To that end, these LEGO sets are absolutely chock full of actual real-life dinosaurs with actual real-life history, which you can actually see in museums. And personally, I find that so much more exciting and so much more interesting than a bunch of made-up dinosaurs that might not necessarily fit with what you will actually see if you go to a museum. Some of these names will be familiar to you by this point. You'll know the Velociraptor, you'll know the T-Rex, you might know the Spinosaurus. Some of these are going to be relatively obscure. You've got things like the Aqualops and the Mosasaurus, which are not quite as well known. So this is a good opportunity for us to run through all of these dinosaurs that will be turning up in LEGO form in these new Jurassic World Rebirth sets, talk about the history of the actual dinosaurs themselves, talk about what kinds of dinosaurs they were, and talk about where relevant their history in LEGO, because some of these dinosaurs have decades of LEGO history, and some of these are absolutely brand new. We've got 7 dinosaurs to get through in this video, so we're just going to plow right in. First off, the adorable Aqualops. This adorable little baby dinosaur is showing up in 2 forms in these LEGO sets, both as a brick-built figure and as a single moulded element within a collection of other minifigure scale things. This is the LEGO debut for the Aqualops, which is not a huge surprise given that this thing was only given a name in 2014. The Aqualops dates back to the early Cretaceous period, making it the oldest dinosaur on this list. It was around from around 104 to 109 million years ago, making it very, very old indeed. The second oldest dinosaur on this list, which we will get to, is the Spinosaurus, which was earliest seen around 100 million years ago, making this thing so old that it didn't overlap with any of the other dinosaurs on this list. As you might expect, with a little bit of wiggle room, the older a dinosaur is, the less likely you are to come across a very well-preserved specimen, and so that's part of the reason why this one is a relatively recent find. It first was discovered in 1997, and when I say first discovered, I mean they had part of the skull of an Aqualops, and that was it at the time. It's for this reason that it took until 2014 for the Aqualops to get its name. Aquila being Latin for eagle, ops being Greek for face. Eagle face, because it has a beak a little bit like an eagle. That is the name for this animal. This is a nice one to see in LEGO form, especially given that it is a relatively recent discovery. With a lot of these dinosaurs, their relevance in LEGO is going to come primarily from their placing in the film. At the time of making this video, the film is not yet public. No one has seen it yet outside of the people who are actually working on it, and so for that reason, you watching this video in the future may well know more about this dinosaur than I do. Anyway, let's move from a relatively obscure dinosaur to one that you have absolutely definitely heard of, and a little bit of controversy here, the Velociraptor. The Velociraptor dates back to the late Cretaceous period, around 71 to 75 million years ago, and as mentioned in a previous video, it's an awful lot smaller than the Jurassic Park and Jurassic World films would have you believe. I very, very briefly covered this in the T-Rex video and didn't give you all of the numbers, and I think maybe just slightly estimated the size a bit smaller than it actually was, because I said it was around the size of a chicken. That's wrong. Definitely a lot of scientists and a lot of researchers will say it's around the size of a turkey. That depends on, of course, how you interpret the size of a turkey. I would also say that it is around about the size of a Cocker Spaniel in terms of weight. It is believed that the real Velociraptor stood at about 50 centimeters, half a meter-ish tall. That's about 1.5-ish, 1.6 feet tall if you happen to be working with the old imperial scale. From nose to tail, it was 1.5 to 2 meters long, or about 5 to 7-ish feet, give or take. Its weight, being a dinosaur that was very feathered and relied on being able to move very quickly, was quite lean for that size. It weighed between 7 and 13 kilograms or 15 to 30 pounds. For context, a Cocker Spaniel weighs about 13 to 16 kilograms, so you can imagine this thing being about the weight of a small dog, even if it was a little bit more stretched out. Either way, significantly smaller than any of the dinosaurs that you see as a Velociraptor in the Jurassic Park films. In fact, I have a theory. I reckon that the Velociraptor would make a pretty good pet nowadays if it were to be around now. After all, this was a fairly small dinosaur, around about the same size as a dog, as I say. It was a pack animal, so it hunted in groups, so very social. It was a meat eater. I can imagine it being very similar to having a pet dog, except it's a pet dog that just happens to look a little bit like a creepy lizard or a little tiny dragon and is covered with feathers. Obviously, the Jurassic Park / Jurassic World dinosaur looks very different, even though it is called a Velociraptor. I previously said that it would be more accurate to call the film dinosaur a Utahraptor. I have been corrected since then. It would be more appropriate to call it a Deinonychus. The first Velociraptor skeleton was discovered in 1923 in the flaming cliffs of the Gobi Desert, which is another place like how the T-Rex was discovered in Hell's Creek, which just sounds like a cool place to find a dinosaur. We have our good friend Henry Fairfield Osborn to thank for the name Velociraptor. He also named the Tyrannosaurus Rex, and again he was going for something a little bit spicy, a little bit with just that kind of wow factor here. Velox means swift, raptor means thief, so this is the speedy thief. I also really like this thing's name in Chinese, Choklong, which is speedy dragon, which is just very cool in and of itself. Now, initially, Henry Fairfield Osborn assumed that that very famous Velociraptor claw was a finger claw rather than a toe claw. That is not the only time in this video that we will be discussing how our perception and understanding of dinosaurs has changed over time as we have gained more of an understanding of these animals. Now, the Velociraptor is a member of the theropod family, alongside the Deinonychus, alongside the Utahraptor, alongside others that we'll be talking in this video, like the Tyrannosaurus Rex and the Spinosaurus. What makes the Velociraptor so special here is that it is believed that all modern birds are evolved from the theropod family, specifically the slightly smaller theropods. So when you're looking at the Velociraptor, you are looking at the kind of dinosaur that was the common ancestor for all current birds. And that is a pretty cool thing to have achieved. Well done to the raptors of the world. Anyway, the Velociraptor, unlike the Aqualops, has a long and storied history in LEGO form because it dates back all the way to the LEGO Studios theme and the Jurassic Park 3 sets, and of course good old Johnny Thunder. In 2001, we got 1370 Raptor Rumble Studio. This was, as mentioned, a LEGO Studio set, so it came with a cameraman. It was meant to be a scene from Jurassic Park 3, but for some reason with classic LEGO characters rather than any of the characters from the film included as minifigures in the box. So we've got Johnny Thunder and Pippin Reed here fighting a Velociraptor for no reason other than it's kind of cool. And the LEGO group wouldn't continue to do this kind of merging of their IPs and their brands alongside license partners, but it's kind of cool to see this as a transitional set as the LEGO group moved to work more closely with a bunch of outside partners. In 2005, the Velociraptor returned in a slightly different mould for the awkwardly named Dino 2010 theme, also called Dino Attack in some parts of the world. This one somehow looks less like a real Velociraptor than the previous version because it's very stylized. It's meant to look a little bit more scary, a little bit spikier, a little bit angrier. We're drifting further and further away from what this thing actually would have looked like. I'm not saying it isn't a cool design though, this is very nice. Finally, in 2012, we got the Dino theme, and here we had the debut of the version of the Velociraptor that we've been getting to this day, which has had little tweaks over time, different colours and different things like that. But we've also seen it in Jurassic World, and we've seen it in the LEGO Movie 2 sets as well, where the Velociraptors played a major part there alongside Rex Dangervest. Since the Dino theme and more prominently the introduction of the Jurassic World theme, we've never really been without the Velociraptor, and it is a fun staple of basically anyone's LEGO collection at this point. Next up, the Titanosaurus. The Titanosaurus has the distinction of being the first dinosaur species to have been discovered and named to have been first found in India. It dates back all the way to 1877. But the history of this dinosaur and our understanding of it is a little bit coloured by the tumultuous history of the dinosaur specimens that have been discovered. Some vertebrae from this dinosaur were initially discovered all the way back in 1828 by Captain William Henry Sleeman of the East India Company Army. I mean, I say that they were first discovered by him. I'm not saying that actual Indians hadn't discovered these first. I'm just saying that that was the first one to gain prominence because this was a discovery made by a white guy. The name Titanosaurus literally means a titanic lizard. Yep, that does the job. This thing dated back to the late Cretaceous period alongside many others on this list. It was on the Earth from around 66 to 77 million years ago. Just for context, I want you to bear in mind that the entire lifespan of the human species as we understand it is around about maybe 7 million years as things currently stand. I just want you to be aware of the vague timescale when we say that the Titanosaurus was at the earliest around 77 million years ago, and the Aquilops was at the latest around 104 million years ago. That is a gap between these two species that is like 3 to 4 times longer than the entire lifespan of the human species at this point. I just think it's really important to remember just how long the dinosaur rule on the Earth was. It was an incredibly long time compared to our relatively meager, tiny little period of time that we've been around for. Anyway, the Titanosaurus is making its LEGO debut here. That's not very surprising when you bear in mind that a lot of the challenges that people have had in researching this dinosaur over the centuries has been, it's been quite hard to get a really good intact skeleton for this dinosaur. And there's been a lot of mislabeling and misnaming a bunch of skeletons. One of the big challenges that paleontologists face is you've got bones coming out of the ground in various different places, and they're often incorrectly labeled, or people think that they're part of one set of species, but they're actually something completely different. And so for that reason, there's a lot of gaps in our understanding of the Titanosaurus that exist to this day. It's an interesting one for the minds behind Jurassic World Rebirth to have chosen because of all of the gaps in our understanding of this dinosaur. I guess to a certain degree, that means that the animators and the artists that worked on the film have less strict rules around what they can and can't do for this dinosaur. But it does mean that it'll be interesting to see how the public perception of this dinosaur changes after the release of the film. Next up, Mosasaurus. Named not for Moses, but for the Meuse River in Europe, which goes through France and Belgium and the Netherlands, which is where this dinosaur specimen was initially found. It was found a very long time ago. This is the oldest of the dinosaurs on this list that we've been aware of, in that the earliest specimens of this dinosaur were found all the way back in the 1700s. It was in 1764, in fact, that in a chalk quarry in the Netherlands, someone managed to pull one of these skulls out of the ground, and they all looked at it and they said, that's probably some kind of whale, right? Later, another one came out of the ground in 1780. Initially, it was assumed that this was a crocodile. It was later reclassified as a whale again, but still people didn't really know what they were dealing with here. Now this one is interesting because it ties in with the French Revolution. Apparently French revolutionaries got wind of this skeleton and were like, oh, this is a really cool thing, let's go steal it. So they looted the Mosasaurus skull that was available at the time. And there's an apocryphal story that may or may not be true that they ultimately returned it in exchange for 600 bottles of wine. That story is potentially exaggerated, but it is just a fun thing to have in the history of this dinosaur. Now, there is a possibility that in 1804, when Lewis and Clark were journeying across America, they found something that might have been a Mosasaurus skeleton. It might not have been. We don't actually have the specimen that they found, so nobody knows for certain, but some people suspect that it might have been a Mosasaurus, and if so, it would have been the earliest recorded finding of a Mosasaurus in the Americas. But what is definitely certain is that in 1818, in Monmouth County, New Jersey, somebody did find a Mosasaurus skeleton. And that's brilliant because it does show that continental drift and the fact that once upon a time the Americas and Europe were an awful lot closer together because the same specimens were being found on separate parts of the planet. One of the last surviving dinosaurs on this list, it would have been around from around 66 to 82 million years ago. 66 million years ago being about as late as you can get in the history of the dinosaurs before you get a certain catastrophic event that killed most of them. One thing I love about this dinosaur is because it was known so long before many of these, there is actually a sculpture of it, a statue of it, in Crystal Palace Park in London. The Crystal Palace Park dinosaurs are such a cool historical artifact because they show what people thought dinosaurs looked like at a very specific moment in time. Most of them have been completely changed as we have grown to understand these dinosaurs an awful lot better. They have changed very dramatically in shape and in size, and so looking at the Crystal Park dinosaurs, you can be reminded of how science is a process of studying things out and of learning new things and realizing that we don't necessarily always have the best of information to start with, but we can learn and we can develop our understanding of the world around us with time and with practice. What's interesting about the Crystal Palace Park's Mosasaurus is that it's not dramatically different from, say, the one that we've got here in Lego form. It looks, there's a little bit of difference to it, but more or less it's not a very different size and shape compared to some of the other Crystal Palace Park dinosaurs, which are totally and completely different. Anyway, the Mosasaurus is making its Lego debut. This is brick built rather than being molded elements, and I do think that that's actually really cool. This is a very nice looking brick built dinosaur, so it is fun to have. It occurs to me that some people might criticize my calling the Mosasaurus a dinosaur because maybe it doesn't technically fall under that category. Certainly I know that the last dinosaur on this list is actually a pterosaur instead, but I'm calling these all dinosaurs because that's how the public consciousness normally sees them. You can quibble over that if you like, and you are technically correct, which is the best kind of correct, but just for the sake of this video, just for the sake of simplicity, we're calling these all dinosaurs whether or not they technically count as dinosaurs. Anyway, here's one that definitely counts as a dinosaur, the Tyrannosaurus Rex. I've done an entire video on the history of the Tyrannosaurus Rex, so I'm not going to go through all of the details of this particular animal with you. You can definitely just go watch that if you would like to know more about the history of the discovery of the T-Rex. Otherwise though, let's talk about its history in Lego form. The T-Rex first debuted not in a Lego set, but in a Duplo set in 1997. We didn't see the T-Rex in Lego form until the year 2000 with the Dino Island sub-theme for the Lego Adventurers theme. After that, it was like the floodgates opened and we got a bunch of different designs of T-Rexes across various different themes, which were all trying something slightly different. You had a T-Rex in the 2001 Dinosaurs theme. This was brick built. It could be rebuilt as a bunch of other things, including a Spinosaurus, which we will talk about a little bit later. You also in 2001 got a little polybag as part of the LEGO Studios theme, which was a slightly different design for a brick built T-Rex. Then in 2005 you got the Dino 2010/Dino Attack theme and a new different kind of T-Rex. The version of the T-Rex that we are familiar with now, certainly in moulded element form, debuted in 2012 with the Dino theme, and this is the one that has been used for the Jurassic World and Jurassic Park sets. But that is not the only version of the T-Rex we have had in the intervening years, because there have been plenty of different brick-built versions, both as part of the LEGO Creator 3-in-1 theme, and of course some in the Jurassic Park/Jurassic World theme. This has included some very big LEGO T-Rexes and a very small LEGO T-Rex in the form of T-Rex Costume Fan from the Collectible Minifigures Series 24. Now moving on, Spinosaurus, and a question: how do you top the T-Rex? The T-Rex has long been the mascot dinosaur for the Jurassic Park films, showing up first in the original Jurassic Park in that iconic scene in the rain, and then showing up at the climax of Jurassic Park 2, where he's just strolling around terrifying people in the real world. What do you do next? And for the makers of Jurassic Park 3, the logical next step was to find a dinosaur that was even bigger than the T-Rex, and they settled on the Spinosaurus. So the Spinosaurus is the key big dinosaur of Jurassic Park 3, and because Jurassic Park 3 was the first Jurassic Park film to get any LEGO sets, that means that the Spinosaurus debuted all the way back in 2001 in LEGO form. 1371 Spinosaurus Attack is part of the LEGO Studios Jurassic Park theme. It's a Spinosaurus that doesn't look an awful lot like a Spinosaurus because it's mostly kind of equivalent to a T-Rex anyway, and I guess for fans of LEGO at the time, this could have been used as a kind of odd-looking T-Rex as well, depending on what you wanted to use your LEGO for. Also in 2001 you got the brick-built Tyrannosaurus Rex from the Dinosaurs theme, which can be rebuilt into a bunch of different things, including a Spinosaurus. Then, we didn't see another Spinosaurus until 2025 in LEGO form, so it's been a while, but this is one of the earliest dinosaurs to have had the LEGO treatment in the past. Now, the real-world Spinosaurus dates back all the way to the late Cretaceous period, which is the common period for a lot of these Jurassic Park dinosaurs. This one was around between 94 and 100 million years ago, so even longer ago than the T-Rex. The name is nice and straightforward, Spinosaurus. You can probably guess what that means: spine lizard. There are two primary known species of Spinosaurus, the Egyptian Spinosaurus and the Moroccan Spinosaurus. The Egyptian Spinosaurus was the first to be discovered all the way back in 1912 in Egypt, as you might guess, whereas the Moroccan Spinosaurus was not discovered in Morocco until relatively recently in 1996. Now, that original 1912 Egyptian Spinosaurus specimen unfortunately no longer exists. It was destroyed in a bombing raid on Munich in World War II. You would be surprised, researching these dinosaurs, how often it comes up that either a dinosaur specimen is lost, is destroyed, or otherwise is just unaccounted for in the modern era. And that's fascinating when you consider just how much work goes into trying to preserve these things. But anyway, the big question, how much bigger is a Spinosaurus than a Tyrannosaurus Rex? The answer is, it depends on who you ask. As mentioned in the Tyrannosaurus Rex video, paleontology is not a matter of pulling skeletons wholesale out of the ground. You will get fragments, you will get small puzzle pieces, you will get individual elements of a Lego set without the instructions and without necessarily knowing how they're supposed to go together and what they are supposed to look like. And so scientists are often just doing the best they can to put these things together. It is believed then, and there are a bunch of different numbers floating around for this, so this is not set in stone, but it is believed that the Spinosaurus was probably around 15 meters long from nose to tail. That's 49 feet long if you happen to be using the older imperial measurement system. In contrast, the T-Rex was probably around 12 meters or 40 feet in length. Again, these numbers are vague and won't necessarily account for all specimens. It's just that's what we've been able to pull out of the ground, and that's kind of the averages that people are assuming. So the Spinosaurus, notably longer, notably bigger, but not necessarily as dense as the T-Rex, especially as we have gained a greater understanding of the T-Rex. We appreciate that this dinosaur is a lot squatter and a lot stouter and a lot thicker than films like Jurassic Park would have us believe, whereas the Spinosaurus, relatively lean, relatively lightweight for its size. Either way, the differences in size here were enough for the Jurassic Park 3 filmmakers to decide to try and put the Spinosaurus front and centre in a way that the T-Rex had been front and centre in the previous 2 films. I don't think it necessarily worked. I think there are other issues with that film as well, and certainly the Spinosaurus has not gained the kind of cultural ubiquity that the T-Rex has had, but it's still a really cool dinosaur, and it's brilliant to see it returning for Jurassic World Rebirth, and to see it finally returning in LEGO form after a very long absence. The last dinosaur on this list is actually a pterosaur, the Quetzalcoatlus. This one dates back to the late Cretaceous period, as do many of these, around 66 to 68 million years ago. This was one of the largest pterosaurs to ever walk the Earth, and indeed fly above the Earth, and one of the largest wingspans of any creature that has ever lived. An approximate estimate is hard to get, again because we don't necessarily have a huge data set to work from. Scientists estimate, and maybe it was around 10 meters in length. Some estimate that it could have been as big as 15 meters from wingtip to wingtip. That is incredibly big if you bear in mind that probably the most famous British one-man aircraft, the Spitfire, has a wingspan of 11 meters. So this thing, about the size of a Spitfire, but it was a living, breathing animal.
Suppose we could try and get it from the parent, but they're a flying carnivore the size of an F-16.
This thing, I love the history behind this. We're not going to go into huge detail. It was discovered by a master's student who was working towards his master's in paleontology. Graduate student Douglas A. Lawson found it in the Javelina Formation in the Big Bend National Park, Texas in 1971. Now, unfortunately, Douglas decided not to be narcissistic and name this thing after himself, which is a shame because I'd quite like a Douglasaurus. That just sounds fun. No, instead he named the Quetzalcoatlus after Quetzalcoatl, the Aztec flying serpent deity, which is a very cool name for a dinosaur, even if it is a bit difficult for a British person to pronounce. Now, these new 2025 Jurassic World Rebirth sets are not the first time we've had a Quetzalcoatlus in LEGO form. We did previously have one in 2022. It looks to me like maybe the same mold has been used here for the body, but I think we've got a different design of wing here, which is just a little bit wider at its widest point on the new version. It does look pretty cool, but it's not a massive difference necessarily from the old one. So there you have it, a bunch of dinosaurs and a pterosaur, some of them showing up for the very first time in LEGO form. These will debut on the 1st of June 2025 in order to be on store shelves in time for the July release of Jurassic World Rebirth. Which of these are your favourites? Let us know in the comments down below. And of course, make sure that you do all over the rest of the YouTube things. Give the video a thumbs up, hit subscribe and the notification bell. Now, if you're going to be buying any of these LEGO sets, or indeed any other LEGO set in the near future, do make sure that you use the QR code, which is currently on screen, or the affiliate link, which is down in the description. They take you straight to the LEGO website. We get a percentage of the sale when you make a purchase through those links. It genuinely helps out the channel. It doesn't cost you a penny extra. Make sure that you do also go to brickfanatics.com for coverage of all things LEGO, including much more information about Jurassic World dinosaurs, and make sure that you sign up to our newsletter so that you never miss anything LEGO related ever again. Thank you very much for watching and have a lovely day.